Now, as a YouTuber, I frequently go through the analytics and see which videos are performing and which ones are not performing. A frequent performer on this channel is a video that I made on Need for Speed Most Wanted 2012, asking was it really that bad? I concluded that this was not a bad game at all, but it was just a bad Need for Speed game. However, since then we have learned a lot more information on what Most Wanted 2012 could have been. And in today's video, we're going to take a look at the lost and forgotten Need for Speed Most Wanted 2. Before the final game became Burnout Fairhaven, Most Wanted 2012 was shaping up to be something entirely different. The developers at Criterion Games originally planned for a game that was much less friendly and more grungy. Think back to the original Most Wanted from 2005. Remember how the city felt dirty, crime-ridden and alive? The 2012 beta had a very similar tone. The colours were more muted, the city was more industrial, and the entire world had a darker, more realistic aesthetic. It wasn't as bright and arcadey as what we eventually got. One of the biggest surprises, weapons were back. Yep, like in Hot Pursuit 2010, players would have access to what were known as blacklist tech, things like spike strips, EMPs and other tools to help take down rivals. It took a great element from Hot Pursuit but added it into Most Wanted. We could have had a wild time. And let's talk about the story, or rather the story that should have been there. Unlike the final game where you literally had no story whatsoever and you drove around in a world full of context where you race against people with white cars and once you beat them, that was it. The beta had a full-fledged narrative. We would have played as the same protagonist from the 2005 game, now a fugitive in Fairhaven. The plot revolved around being set up, uncovering who was responsible and taking down blacklist members to get closer to the truth. From what source files were able to find within Most Wanted 2012, you had basically been betrayed. Some say it was maybe by Mia. And you had to clear your name. It was an actual progression system, not just a here's a car, now go race. And when you're done, do another race again. Even the driving itself was different. As you can see from the early build footage, the early builds featured a mix of oversteer and understeer, meaning handling felt more natural. Not to mention speed breakers, pursuit breakers and cooldown spots were all in at play. Your car could even get so damaged that it could have totaled you, like what you see on modern Need for Speeds. Most of these mechanics were still present as late as the E3 trailer, but somehow along the way, things changed. Weather effects, rain and dynamic lighting were removed. The game became less about tactics and more about open world chaos. So what the hell happened? How did we lose this version of Most Wanted? The short answer, we don't know. But a lot of people believe that it was due to EA's brutal deadlines. Back then, Need for Speed games were being pushed out yearly. In fact, 2011 had 2 Need for Speeds out. Although they were by 2 different developers, this still left absolutely no time for a proper development cycle. If Criterion had just one more year, we might have gotten the Most Wanted 2 we actually wanted. The good news is that these rushed development cycles are mostly a thing of the past. Now Need for Speed games take 2, 3, maybe 5 years at this point between releases, but back in 2012, this was not an option. The 2012 we got was just not a Most Wanted, it was barely a Need for Speed game, and it's an absolute crying shame. Because if you ignore that part, it is a good racing game. And seeing quite a lot of my younger viewers who watched the original video saying that they grew up with this game is quite impressive and surprising. This game had the exact same effect on a younger generation as the 05 version did on myself. It was quite surprising, but impressive to see that we still are creating more and more car enthusiasts and fans of the franchise. But yet, that's not the real kicker. This is. Nearly 13 years later, we look back at Most Wanted 2012, and many of us, including myself, realised that we were just too harsh. Sure, it wasn't the Most Wanted we expected, but it wasn't that bad. It just wasn't what the hardcore fans wanted. And a game that just wasn't worthy of the name. However, learning about what we could have had stings. It's another example of EA stepping in and making decisions that ultimately hurt the final product. And for that, I think it's fair to say that Need for Speed fans had every right to be frustrated. And I can't help but just feel absolutely awful for the developers who passionately had an idea which was later taken away from them. thanks to EA. So what do you think? Would the original version made Most Wanted 2012 a better game, or was it doomed to be Burnout Fairhaven? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Hit the bell icon so you don't miss the next video. And finally, thank you all so much for watching. I hope to see you all very soon.